This idea of the two things in harness, you talked about the contrast, and Jews love to do that contrasting thing, whether it's Pharisees and the Sadducees or the Hasidim and the Mitnagdim, the Hasidim and their opponents, or whether indeed nowadays it's the Orthodox and the progressives, or whether it's the secular and the religious, or the Zionists and the non-Zionists. The Jewish world loves to do this bifurcation thing. But actually, of course, the Jewish genius is somehow keeping them all in play simultaneously. The Talmud is magnificently both and in that sense, it categorically contrasts with the Greek instinct, which is either or. I mean, Aristotle categorically says that things are either alpha or not alpha, and it's based on that logic that one arrives nowadays at binary theory, which underpins so much of our computer technology. But what we now know is that binary theory is not sufficient. Take our computers into really flexible work. We end up with what was called fuzzy logic and things like this, where the either-or thing simply doesn't solve our problem. And our fear, I suppose, about artificial intelligence is that it might be too ruthlessly logical, when in fact, of course, the human condition requires a level of sloppiness in order to accommodate the human reality.
That was Clive Lawton discussing the song Weaving a Garment of Light, which Ruby Corbyn-Ross and I wrote after being inspired by Psalm 19. I'm Shep Rosenman. This is The Rest is Commentary, where we discuss what songs inspired by the Psalms inspire in my guests. In 2016, Clive was honored by the Queen of England with an OBE, Officer of the Order of the British Empire, for his services to the Jewish community and education. He was named by the New York Allgemeine newspaper as one of the top 100 people contributing to the well-being of the Jewish people worldwide. He was voted number 18 in the first UK Jewish Power 100 list and awarded the Max Fisher International Prize for Jewish Education by the Jewish Agency in Jerusalem. Clive is the chief executive of the Commonwealth Jewish Council, scholar in residence at JW3, London's flagship Jewish community centre, of which he was a founding trustee, an independent tribunal chair for the UK's National Health Service, a magistrate on the Wiltshire Bench. In LA, that's probably pronounced Wilshire. He is on the faculties of the European Centre for Leadership Training and the London School of Jewish Studies, and an international consultant on management and education. Clive is active as a Holocaust educator and international speaker. He has worked with both the Jewish community and the general community in the UK on a variety of matters, including police, education, health, interfaith dialogue, urban planning, and equal opportunity matters. Clive broadcasts regularly and has written 15 books. I came to know Clive through the Limud movement, as he was one of its founders and facilitated many of the trainings I participated in. In this episode, we discuss the duality of existence, cosmic grandeur and mundane reality, being awed by humanity's capacity to achieve things through work, the tension between our ability to influence the world and forces beyond our control, the Messianic age as a time of improvement for the whole world, not just for the Jews, social responsibility as a core tenet of Jewish life, Holocaust education not being just about history, but as a reminder not to perpetrate injustice. Jewish tradition valuing the coexistence of contrasting ideas and perspectives, the importance of critical thinking and variety in understanding religious texts, the role of Jews as challenging societal norms and provoking thought, whether tzedakah, commonly known as charity, is a duty or a virtue. We discuss so much more as well. Let's start off by listening to Weaving a Garment of Light.
Watches you make a fire. There is comfort in work, the work of our hands, weaving a garment of light. There is comfort in work, the work of our hands, weaving a garment of light. Sunrise Sunday morning, feeling restless now. I sense he's Thursday his heart is filling with laughter. He'll teach himself to write. He'll teach himself to write. Dusk on Friday evening, his heart is filling with light. He loves it when he's reading, and he'll teach me how to write. There is comfort in work, the work of our hands, weaving the garments of light. There is comfort in work, the work of our hands, weaving the garments of light. Weaving the garments of light. Weaving the garments of light. Weaving the garments of light.
Hi, Clive.
Hello there, Shep.
So, in the same way that I was inspired to write this song by the psalmist, I was hopeful that it inspired something in you and was curious to hear what it inspired. Questions, comments, love, loathing, hope, hatred, whatever it is.
Well, one of the things that people say on British television when commenting on football, it's one of those boring cliches, is it's a game of two halves, which basically means to say, you play one way, but that doesn't decide it because the other way could take it a different way. And this is really a psalm of two halves. And the two halves are so dramatically, I think, in contrast with each other in a remarkable tension. And the psalmist switches so firmly, he doesn't even segue, just turns straight from one to the other. I found a quote from the philosopher Immanuel Kant, which I thought was kind of very echoed this so nicely. Kant has a lot wrong with him. So I'm not recommending him. And please don't bother to go up and try and read him. But, he did say some remarkable things. One of the things he said was this: there are two things that fill my soul with holy reverence and ever-growing wonder: the spectacle of the starry sky that virtually annihilates us as physical beings, and the moral law which raises us to infinite dignity as intelligent agents. That contrast, that sense of the awesomeness of God's grandeur, that remarkable universe, the starry sky that Kant talks of, on the one hand, and there's this swing to the pedestrian, to the domestic, to the ground, to the ordinary things that we have to pay attention to. You can look at the stars and feel crushed by their scale. We are indubitably puny and irrelevant when things on a universal level. And then you turn to this, yes, but what are we going to do about it? There's that thing in the Midrash, isn't there, that people carry in their pockets, two different things. Yeah. For your sake, the world was created, and, the ant was created before you. That sense that we are both the pinnacle of creation and especially nowadays with climate change and so on, the interruption of it, the offense of it. And I think that today's concern about the climate accentuates for us how easily the world could sweep us away, to simply wipe us off the face of the planet. And yet at the same time, there's nothing more remarkable than us to solve this problem.
Yeah.
This endless tension of life being entirely in our hands, and yet, on the other hand, entirely beyond us. And this psalm unashamedly swings from one to the other. It's the boldest, most careless piece of flourish that I can think of in a poem.
I see that a lot in the Psalms. One of my friends refers to many of the Psalms as reflecting a kind of bipolar personality.
He swings emotionally. So
yeah.
He swings emotionally. But this complete swing, I think it's very salutary for today's world that is distressing itself, wisely in many ways, at the things beyond our control.
Mm-hmm.
We look at climate change. Just now I've just been to see the film Oppenheimer, and the reawakened awareness of the power of atomic energy for harm. I'm old enough to remember the time when, teenagers and young adults were just worried sick about how we could blow ourselves up. But for the last 30, 40 years, 30 years, let's say, we thought that was all behind us. Now suddenly, Putin posturing about what he could do with his nuclear arms suddenly scares us again.
Mm-hmm.
And we're equally scared about what we've done technologically and industrially in the world. And now we're getting scared about artificial intelligence and what we could unleash. I mean, our awareness of our finite incompetence is intense. And the first half of this certainly soars beyond us into the heavens, into the universe. But then, in a way different, I mean, certainly David, the psalmist in general, segues from one thing to another. But as a rule, the psalms remain on an emotional level or on a level of grandeur or attending to the fate of Jerusalem or whatever it might be. But here, it is a thing of two halves. And you may know that there are commentators who suggest that this indicates that it's two bits cobbled together.
Yeah.
I find that so arrogant when people do that. The idea that an editor is such an idiot that he can't see that he's locked together two things that don't fit. To my mind, this is proof that there is not an editor of this. Because any intelligent editor would go, I don't think you can put those two things together. This is a mistake. We're not doing it. This is proof that there is indubitably a single writer, because nobody other than a single writer would dare to lock these two things together with so abrupt a switch.
And why do you think the writer put them together then?
Because I think that there are those two levels of awareness to be played.
Yeah.
That is, simply standing in gobstruck awe the universe is of no practical use to human beings. I must tell you this, Shep, and this is very Californian. Some years back, I was invited to Orange County, California, to be their scholar in residence. They have a wonderful community program there.
Sure.
And I spent a month. It's very tough. I was forced to stay in a beachfront bungalow and stuff, and to work with all the different communities in Orange County, the Orthodox, progressive, Masorti, conservative, various different cultural organizations and so on. It was a wonderful, wonderful program. And I had a marvelous time meeting with all the different Jews of different stripes there and exploring many different topics. And of course, I had time off, which was wonderful too. People showed me the various beaches and so forth along the Orange County coast. And one of them said that beach is a great place to see the sunset. So I thought, well, I better do this then, right? So I drive to that beach at around sunset time, and there on the beach must be 100 people gazing into the sky, looking at the sunset. And so I stand with them, to see what's going on. And, well, I mean, hardly surprisingly, it was a sunset. It was a very beautiful sunset, lovely sunset. And I turned to somebody and I said, so do you come here often? He said, I come here every day. And I said, oh, right. Why? He said, well, to see the sunset. Uh-huh. And is there something particularly remarkable about it here on this beach as opposed to some other beach? He said, oh, well, it's marvelous from here. I don't know if it's my old world, cynical, skeptical, I can't go with the childlike wonder of Californian enjoyment. But I found myself thinking, oh, for goodness sake, you've seen it now. You don't turn up every day. I mean, I can imagine that some sets are truly remarkable and maybe you don't want to miss them. But there's more to life than this, right? Well, I regret now that I didn't interview him and say, so what else do you do when you're not looking at the sunset? It might have been a brain surgeon or something. But it seemed to me that simple wonder has to be allied with engagement, activity, involvement. And this, it seems to me, is what the psalm is saying. There is this stunning stuff far beyond us that reveals knowledge, it's certainly. But I mean, the knowledge it reveals is kind of beyond our grasp. The absence of speech, and remember, speech is the manner in which we know things. We can only articulate knowledge through words. And there are no voices, and there's no speech. This knowledge is far beyond our grasp. And it's awesome in the proper sense of the word, not in the casual sense of the word. But having said all of that, having recognized all of that, and having appreciated all of that, there's stuff to be done. and you've got to grasp doing it. And in many ways, I suppose, this is a clarion call against paganism. I've long felt that Jews and others in the world are in an intellectual and conceptual struggle against paganism. And of course, that's what the Torah is talking about.
Sure.
The Torah is not condemning Christianity or Islam or even Hinduism or Buddhism or anything else. It's condemning paganism, idolatry in that sense. And the quality of paganism that distinguishes it from Judaism and other religions is the sense that we are victims of nature rather than participants in it. We don't have to assuage nature or placate it or whatever. We have to engage with it. And I think that this is what this psalm is saying. Look at this stunning stuff. It's just beyond imagining. Isn't God glorious and powerful and impressive? But guys, we've got stuff to get on with.
Right.
And the interface between the universe and human being is the law that we engage with, the precepts. To take the translation that you offered, what are the key words? Enduring, perfect, just, lucid, pure. I mean, more desirable than gold, sweeter than honey, dripping off the comb. I mean, these are the things you want to grasp and grapple with and enjoy. We are not supposed to try and keep nature happy. We're not supposed to be crushed by the universe. We're supposed to be players and activists and engage.
Milu et haaretz v'kivshuha. Fill the land and conquer it. It goes back to one of my friends talking about this Tehillim, connected this Tehillim to the two stories of creation, where one was very much focused on the work of humanity and one was very much focused on the grandeur of the creation of the world. And I think that dialectic, that those two poles find themselves expressed in a variety of reflections of Judaism, whether it's the Prushim and the Tzdukim, or those are the Pharisees and the Sadducees, or much later in the difference between the Hasidic approach and the Misnagdish approach, the Litvish approach, where it's either about the law or it's about nature. And ultimately what I'm hearing you saying, or maybe I'm hearing you saying it because I happen to agree with this, is you need to look at the sunset and you need to engage in the world, whether it's with law, which I happen to do for a living, and I know that you do as well, or by engaging with the laws by being out in the world and fixing hunger, fixing climate change. Anyway, that's enough for me. I'm off my soapbox.
Well, Shep, I really like the fact that you draw this together to the two accounts of creation in Bereshit and Genesis, because in a sense it goes back to my comments before about the suggestion that somehow this psalm is produced by an editor who stupidly didn't notice that the two bits didn't fit together, because you'll know that one of the what they call the higher critical approaches to the Bible suggests that the Torah is put together by a variety of folk and that there are discernible different parts. You know, this is one of the disputes that lie between Orthodox Jews and progressive Jews, is the extent to which one gives credence to this theory. And one of the first examples that they offer are these two stories of creation. They say, well, obviously, you've got two different traditions being brought together here and jammed into the one book, and that's why we've got an account of creation like this and an account of creation like that. And once again, I mean, I think, the suggestion that an editor is so stupid as to not notice you've got two accounts of creation and not think that you ought to say something intelligent if you're going to stick them together suggests to me that there aren't two accounts of creation sort of mistakenly, but that they throw diverse lights on the narrative. One grand and universal, the other local and human scale. The whole of Genesis reminds me a lot of the opening sequence of West Side Story, where you have this helicopter hovering over the whole of Manhattan, slowly coming down onto the west side and then slowly down and down into a basketball yard. And the Torah kind of does that. It looks at this vast creation story and then slowly shrinks down into antediluvian, mythical garden world where everything is kind of beyond imagining, really, and then slowly looks at the unfolding of humanity and the flood and so on, until finally the camera comes down and focuses on Abraham and says, okay, well, let's just follow this lot and see what happens to them and so on. I think it's partly God finding himself incapable of managing a social science experiment. Ultimately, he's got to kind of control it, and he decides to pick a control group and see what he can do with that. But this idea of the two things in harness, you talked about the contrast, and Jews love to do that contrasting thing, whether it's Pharisees and the Sadducees, or the Hasidim and the Mitnagdim, the Hasidim and their opponents, or whether indeed nowadays it's the Orthodox and the progressives, or whether it's the secular and the religious, or the Zionists and the non-Zionists. The Jewish world loves to do this bifurcation thing. But actually, of course, the Jewish genius is somehow keeping them all in play simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
The Talmud is magnificently both and in that sense, it categorically contrasts with the Greek instinct, which is either or. I mean, Aristotle categorically says that things are either alpha or not alpha. And it's based on that logic that one arrives nowadays at binary theory, which underpins so much of our computer technology. But what we now know is that binary theory is not sufficient. Take our computers into really flexible work. We end up with what was called fuzzy logic and things like this.
Right.
Where the either-or thing simply doesn't solve our problem. And our fear, I suppose, about artificial intelligence is that it might be too ruthlessly logical, when in fact, of course, the human condition requires a level of sloppiness in order to accommodate human reality. The most efficient way of avoiding suffering is to kill everybody. That kind of thing. We can't tolerate that kind of thinking. It's intolerable. We know that the great horrors of the 20th century, Stalinism and Nazism, were constructed on the basis of at least some theoretical absoluteness, right? You apply some rules and then you prosecute them ruthlessly. And that sense that it's all perfectly clear, it's all perfectly logical, it's either this or it's that. The Talmud utterly rejects that. And Jewish thinking, I think, ought to utterly reject it. The manner in which we somehow manage to embrace the both and position is what I think makes Jews so infuriating to the rest of the world.
Do you connect this impulse to, we read it over and over again this time of year, the commandment in the Torah to love the stranger, to engage with the other because we were others ourselves when we were slaves in Egypt?
Yeah, Jews are constantly being called upon to stand apart, the people that dwells alone. And part of our function is to continuously challenge any proposal that we've got it sorted, right? Any human being that comes along and goes, I've got the answer, I know how it ought to be done. Jews ought to be saying, excuse me, we don't quite fit that. That doesn't quite work for us. How are you going to accommodate us? And unfortunately, I mean, and it's a human instinct, isn't it? That Jews want to fit in just like everybody else. We don't like standing separately and apart. And the process of assimilation, which is several steps beyond integration. Integration is a fruitful exercise. Assimilation is a process of disappearing. That instinct for some to assimilate into disappearance loses the fundamental function of the Jews, which is to get up people's noses, to upset anybody who thinks they've got a system that works. Well, one of the wonderful things in the Middle Ages, when the Jews were under, phenomenal pressure, it's just astonishing that they made it through. The phenomenal pressure being presented, on the one hand by Christianity and on the other hand by Islam, both of whom were asserting, we are the pinnacle answer to the human engagement with God and the world, right? We have the truth. And all you have to do, all humanity has to do, is accept our truth, and we will bring about, universal glory. And with this incredible pressure, and not just, pressure of oppression and exclusion and all of those things, we know all of that history, but the pressure of looking at Christians and Muslims and thinking, my goodness, they do know something. And the Christians are kind of astonishingly beautiful and successful and remarkable in the things that they did in the world, right? And Muslims are sweeping across the planet, like nobody could stop them. And you're bound to be tempted to go, well, maybe God is on their side. I mean, maybe they have got it. I mean, look at us. What a collection of failures we are, a little bundle of people scrabbling across the world in the face of these two vast things. And wonderfully, just a few Jewish thinkers go, wait a minute, they can't both be right. Right? So, I mean, at that point, the Jews get, well, if they're not both right, well, maybe neither of them is right. And so was born a kind of chutzpahdik, davka insistence that we don't have to go with these universal solutions to how the world must be. And the Jewish position, which is we must allow for variety, for diversity, is critical. Now, oddly enough, Jews are very much worse at doing it internally than we are at doing it externally. We're just wonderful at including Christians and Muslims and Hindus and whatnot, right? What we can do with Sikhs is just amazing. But present me with a woman wearing a kippah, or a Jew with his tzitzit out or something, and I get hysterically offended by the fact this isn't the proper way to do it, right? And that's a great shame. And it betrays, I think, a central function of the Jews in the world. Every time the Jews find themselves fitting in and agreeing, I think we should get a bit nervous. And our function is to not fit in and challenge.
Can I ask a question that comes out of that for me? If our purpose is not to fit in, on some level that suggests a perpetualness to the role. How does that align with the concept of Messiah or Mashiach? Are we destined, for good or for bad, to have this role forever? Or is there some point at which, God is saying, okay, you can rest, Jews. You don't need to kind of get up in everybody's business because the Messiah is going to come and relieve you?
Shep, I don't know. Right. I mean, nobody knows. Let's be honest, right? We haven't got a clue. The whole messianic thing is a magnificent vagueness, Jewishly. I know people have tried to categorize it and be explicit about it. And there are some people who are actually really quite rude about it. We want Mashiach now. They don't even say, please. I think, the whole idea of Mashiach is at some level repository for optimism. Mm-hmm. That's all. It's worth continuing because we have a dream, a vision, a hope that things will be better. But that's a hope for the world, not a hope for the Jews. The Messianic age is not something that's going to make things lovely for the Jews only. It's something that's going to make things lovely for the world at large. Right. That's why it's worth hoping for.
Right.
Now, of course, that doesn't mean to say it's not going to be nice for the Jews. We've got the ingathering of the exiles and so on. But although, frankly, I can't think of anything less entertaining than all the Jews living in one place. But that might go to suggest that your proposition suggests that for the Jews, there will be rest in the Messianic age, that Jews will get home, don't need to play that part anymore in the wider world. However, what we found is the messianic hope of creating a Jewish state, which many people hoped was the Reshit Tzmichat Gala, the beginning of the redemption, effectively, simply transferred things onto a national basis rather than an individual basis. Mm-hmm. So where Jews were the eternal other individually, they create a state and they become the eternal other as a state.
Right.
And once again, sometimes the state of Israel performs magnificently in challenging the world in terms of its values and expectations and definitions, and exposing the world in its hypocrisies and insufficiencies. And it displays that in the same way as Jews could be uncomfortable to the non-Jewish world, initially religiously, then economically, then in terms of class, then in terms of race, then in terms of politics, now in terms of statehood. It's the function of the Jews continuously, I think, to keep troubling folk who think they've got the answer. Now, one might want to hope that the Messianic age is a time when the answer is obvious,
Right.
as it were, and everybody can relax. But, speculation on the Messianic age is a bit like speculation on heaven. It doesn't help anybody. I try to work both in the Jewish and in the general world, and I try to work both locally and internationally. But perhaps if I could just offer my tzedakah philosophy. So, as you know, everybody needs to give tzedakah.
Which means?
To give, the not very good English word is charity. But charity, of course, is a virtue. Tzedakah is a duty. Tzedakah relates to the word justice, and you've got to be fair. You've got to share yourself. If you're lucky enough to have, then you must share it with those who need. So this imperative tzedakah, in my own mind, I divide up into 6 elements. My local Jewish world and my local general world, my national Jewish world, my national general world, my international Jewish world, and my international general world. And by the end of the year, I want to be able to look myself in the face and say, I made a contribution to each of those 6 things. And that's tzedakah. Tzedakah, of course, is giving your resources. Communal chasadim, acts of loving kindness, is giving of your time, of yourself. That's a slightly different thing. I have to say that I can't say that I rigorously look across my activities in terms of the way I spend my time and cover all of those 6 units. But I'd like to believe that I play a part in several of them each year. And if I find that I've gone 2 or 3 years and rather neglected one arena, then I do try to find a way to plunge in and play there too.
Does that mean you track it through the year or just kind of towards the end of the year?
Well, it's one of the things that, we're coming up to Elul now, the month before Rosh Hashanah, you do a bit of reviewing. So I think it is probably in the back of my mind, and I am kind of aware of it. I don't sit down with notes and count up hours or indeed pounds and pence. I just try to keep a sense that I have not forgotten this area. And certainly as I come up to Rosh Hashanah, I certainly try to review that and think, do I need to do this differently next year, or what do I need to add in? So those 6 arenas are the way I try to keep things in play. And I hope you notice that I say Jewish in general, not Jewish and non-Jewish.
Yep.
Because, Jews are also humans, and there are things that Jews must do which are general things that we should be in both as Jews and just as human beings. For example, I'm quite actively involved in Holocaust education. And I think the only lesson that a Holocaust education can teach or should teach is how to avoid being a perpetrator.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's anything else. Everything else is commemoration, right? Or offensive. How to avoid being a victim. That's just offensive, suggesting that somehow, if only they were cleverer, they could have got away with it or something. But everything else is commemoration. What were those people like? What did they live? How did they? That's all a Jewish function. We must remember those people. But the lesson to learn is how do you avoid being a perpetrator? And that, of course, is a lesson for all human beings, including Jews.
Right.
It's not especially, Jews are not especially immune from the dangers of becoming a perpetrator. And in that sense, it's something that I would want to do across the world. So the general world, not just the non-Jewish world.
Yeah, that view aligns very beautifully with what I've heard Stephen Smith talk about, who used to run the Shoah Foundation here.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he's been to Limud 100 times, so I'm sure you've met.
Yes, Stephen's an old mate.
Thank you so much for doing this, Clive. Every time I hear you, every time we speak, I walk away refreshed, energized, and full of knowledge and full of questions, and those 2 things really kind of make my day. Thank you so, so much.
Thanks for including me, Shep. I wish you well.
Of course. Thank you. Be well. Thanks so much for listening. Special thanks to Clive Lawton for joining me, and to Emil Stern for his help in producing this episode, to E-Rose for his help producing the song in the episode, and to Jessica Hanna-Sweedler for her help on social media, to Liat Silvera for designing the podcast logo, and to my wife Shari, who gives me the time, space, and support to make the music and this podcast happen. You can find Weaving a Garment of Light and all of the other songs in this song cycle on most platforms that stream or download music, including Spotify and Apple. You can find Ruby's music with her band Crossing Canal on Spotify or on Facebook. You can also find her solo stuff on Facebook. In the next episode of The Rest is Commentary, I will be talking with Seattle-based singer-songwriter, producer, prayer leader, and more, Chava Mirel. We discuss the relationship between Judaism and political identity, how our actions can reflect the teachings of the Torah, the essence of Judaism requiring moral and ethical conduct even in the political and military spheres, personal and communal responsibility, hope, and future generations, and so much more. All inspired by Chava's thoughts after listening to Mercy, inspired by Psalm 21. Please join us.